All right, welcome back to the Powers on Sports podcast. We have just concluded NFL draft weekend. We are in the thralls of NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, lots of stuff going on MLB baseball season, and no better person to get an update about all these different great things going on than TJ Rives, sideline reporter, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, podcast host, Three Dog Thursday, does a boxing podcast, did a college basketball podcast during the college basketball season, and was even the host of the Buccaneer draft party, which didn't turn into much of a party because our Buccaneers traded out of the first round from Raymond James Stadium. Welcome back, Mr. Rives.
It's always good to be with you. And we should also mention that you and I are both decked out in the Lightning garb because at the time that we're taping this podcast, rumors of the two-time Stanley Cup champion Lightning's demise greatly exaggerated again after they lose one game, the opening game to Toronto. They have won game 2 on the night we're doing this podcast. You've got the shirt on. I've got the old school 1993 replica jersey on. So for those that cannot see us, just know we've got the Lightning mojo going as they go for a three-peat, which you love these nuggets when I give them to you. The last three-peat of any kind in the Big Four sports is the LA Lakers 2000, 2001, 2002, Shaq and the late Kobe Bryant. The last three-peat in hockey is the New York Islanders, who won 4 in a row in the early 1980s. It ain't easy to do, but the Lightning are going to try to do that here over the next few weeks, and we're interested in all of that. So I'm good for whatever you like, whether it's the hockey, the draft, anything you got, brother.
We're at the hockey. Let's get into the hockey first, since we're on the hockey. What are the cool? For me, I don't watch a ton of hockey during the regular season, but I just love watching the drama of playoff hockey with all the overtimes. The games are so close. You know, these guys, they don't mail it in. They don't ever mail it in. They're not on they're not playing 3 games in 5 nights like they might in the regular season or 4-game road trips. That's very focused. Talk to me about just playoff hockey in general and how it compares to other playoffs that we follow.
I will say this. I mean, there's certainly drama in the 7-game series of the NBA playoffs and the 7-game series of the baseball October playoffs and the World Series. So there's drama, but it's not like the hockey drama that you just alluded to, where it seems like almost every game is a one goal game, and about a third of the games are overtime games.
Right.
So you just
last night 3 overtimes, Rangers and
Yes. And night after night, you're going to see goal late in the third or an overtime goal that decides it. It is a nitroglycerin tablet special, it seems like, for the NHL. And we've had a blast with what the Lightning have been able to do the last couple of years. Of course, 2 years ago, it was in the bubble. We were completely detached while they were winning in both Toronto and Edmonton in front of no fans in the NHL bubble. Last year, reduced fans until the playoffs really got rolling. And then the NHL said the heck with it on the COVID guidelines for the fans. Just let whoever in that wants to come in for the last couple of series, including the Stanley Cup win over Montreal. So again, I fully realize most of the audience is not hockey. Most of the audience is probably football 1, baseball 2, maybe basketball, NBA 2 and 2A, college football. But still, the hockey is a blast because the Lightning have been so good and so much fun, and winning all the time doesn't hurt, that's for sure. So it's going to be fun to watch them with a lot of experienced championship caliber players. Can they pull off something that hasn't been done in any sport in 20 years? If they can do it, we'll see.
And the Lightning will be home Friday, Sunday for game 3 and game 4. 2 things I really like about hockey as compared to the NBA. Hockey, they play every other night. We're not having to wait 4 days in between game 2 and game 3, like in basketball. That's just ridiculous. And I know it's TV, but please, it's ridiculous. It's bad. It's just not a good flow.
It kills the buzz. It kills the momentum.
And the unpredictability. Every year there's that 7 or 8 seed in the NHL that'll win a series or 2. Many times you've had an 8 seed go to the finals. You've had a 6 seed where you don't see as much of that in the NBA. The unpredictability of the result also makes it very appealing for the fan.
Well, and you make a great point because look no further than last year where Montreal was awful and they had the crazy, we won't get into all of it. They had the crazy setup with everybody playing kind of like their own pod of teams, and they played the same 7 teams the whole year.
Last year,
Canada, last year, 2021. They played the same pod of all Canadian teams the whole year. They didn't play any teams from the United States in the whole regular season.
Right.
And they had to have 4 teams because of the way they set up the playoffs. They had to have 4 Canadian teams.
Right.
And the Montreal team was just awful for a lot of the regular season, but they got hot in the playoffs, to your point. And with a losing record, won 3 playoff series and got all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So truly, to your point, anything can happen when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's why we love it. We love playoff drama of all kinds. I mean, the NBA will get good. I know this is not in the market where we are. It's not a big NBA market at all. The Orlando Magic have been so terrible for so long that the NBA doesn't resonate the same way here like it does in the Northeast or in Los Angeles or in the upper Midwest, in Chicago and Detroit and Milwaukee. They care lots about the NBA. Not in Florida so much, but I'll watch. I'm a basketball guy. It's not the college basketball March Madness that you and I love, but I'll watch the NBA playoffs as it whittles down and gets to the finals.
I'll give you a good Tampa Bay Lightning nugget.
Please.
Andre Vasilevsky, now 15-0 following a loss.
That's incredible.
15-0.
Can I borrow that or steal that as my own? I think I got to put that on social media right now.
Take it. 15-0.
You talk about the ultimate game changer in playoff series. There it is, where if you don't lose twice in a row, much less 3 in a row, you're very tough to eliminate.
Right.
That's what I take away from that nugget, that they lose a game, but he doesn't let them lose the second game or much less a third game in a row.
Right.
What a great job for the Russian goalie. And can I just say this? I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of all the politics and the horrible situation with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but I think this needs to be illuminated that for these Russian hockey players, all right, the Russian athletes worldwide, for example, there's a Russian fighter fighting Canelo Alvarez in boxing Saturday night in Las Vegas for a pay-per-view, huge payday championship fight. A lot of these Russians are in a real bind playing in the United States or being athletes in the United States. And the Lightning hockey players like Vasilevsky, like one of their great goal scorers, Nikita Kucherov, they're in a bind because their families are still in Russia. They can't speak to their families in a lot of instances. They're cut off right now, and or they can't send them money financially. They can't evacuate them from Russia, from the stories that I've heard, because of the chaos. Maybe not be all the way true with all the Russians. Some of their immediate family is obviously with them if they're married, if they have kids or whatever. But if you have parents, if you have extended relatives that are in Russia that you're unsure and you can't get money to because of what's going on with the sanctions and the government, it's playing on these guys' psyches while they play. And they are human beings after all. And if they were to speak out, I keep hearing the criticism, why aren't the Russian athletes in the NHL, Ovechkin, with Alexander Ovechkin's one of the premier players in the league if you don't follow hockey. Why is he not speaking out? For fear of what they not only do to him, but fear of what they do to his relatives if he speaks out about the invasion. So that's just kind of a backdrop from hockey where there's so many prominent Russian players. There you go.
And I'm sure there's a variety of opinions amongst the Russian players. Some probably support the invasion. Who knows? Who knows what their relationship is with Putin and all that stuff? You never know. But it's trickling all throughout the sports world. Wimbledon has booted out all the Russian players, not allowing them to play in Wimbledon. So that's something.
Which a lot of people are against. And European tennis is still huge. And there are some that believe the Russian players shouldn't be punished. Then there's others, like you said, on the other side of the aisle that are saying this is how you get back at Putin and this is how you put pressure on him. Because the Russian athletes and others will put the pressure on him on what are you doing to us in our careers with what you're doing. Yes, agree.
No, you're right. That's it. That's a very, especially in hockey, that's a very big thing to be the emotional toll that this whole situation takes on those players and their families. Because you're right. Lots of those players got families that are probably still there, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in other parts of Russia, who knows?
I saw something where there's numerous Russian hockey players, and then we'll move on. I know you want to move on in the NHL that do have family members that were living in Ukraine. There are a lot of Russian immigrants living in Ukraine. The southern portion of what used to be the Soviet Union became their home, and they're now being bombed by the country that they were all originally inhabitants of. So you're right. And we've gone down the social platform, the political platform rabbit hole here on you, but Just thought we'd share that for the Powers on Sports podcast audience as the Lightning continue to try to excel with Russian hockey players. 3 of their players, Vasilevsky, the goalie, Kucherov, the goal scorer, a good defenseman in Sergachev, they're all Russians. This story's not going away.
They're not bottom of the roster guys. They're critical elements to the team.
Yep.
Critical. So, all right, let's hit. I want to hit one NBA point. Your thoughts on the flagrant foul last night, Dylan Brooks? Steve Kerr after the game says it breaks the code and all that stuff. Your general thoughts about the play. It's a bad play, no doubt about it.
So we're talking about Memphis and Golden State, and I'm a Memphis guy, although I'm not a huge Memphis Grizzlies guy because they weren't around when I was in school there. They moved from Vancouver to Memphis after I had left school and come and been in the media in Florida for a while. I would love to see the Grizzlies do well. Golden State is obviously the darling child of the NBA. They want Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and that team to be in the Western Conference Finals, if not the NBA Finals. It goes back to the Draymond Green ejection Sunday, which I didn't think was warranted. And so in some ways, Memphis is trying to police that themselves and pay back Draymond Green. They knocked him down once. They hit Gary Payton II with the foul you're talking about and broke his wrist. So I kept waiting. I did not see today. Enlighten me. Did Brooks get a game suspension? Did he get more than that?
I haven't heard.
So again, the NBA's got to crack down on the flagrant fouls where the other guy gets injured and can't play the rest of the series or maybe the rest of the playoffs, which is the case in this one. But I come out of the old school. You know me. I'm older than you. I come out of the old school of the 80s. And I still remember the Kevin McHale clothesline of Kurt Rambis that we all know, Celtics Lakers, 1984.
Lambeer and Bird and Parrish.
Right. Lambeer and the Pistons were always doing it to the Bulls and the Celtics. But the McHale play, the clothesline, the Hulk Hogan clothesline, the Macho Man Savage clothesline wasn't even a technical foul, much less an ejection. So the NBA has changed. And I agree about player safety, but you go back to the 80s and you watch what was going on with the game policing itself and who would pay whom back. It was a different time, that's for sure.
For our younger listeners that maybe aren't old enough, Google McHale and Kurt Rambis, Lakers Celtics back in the 80s, and you will see a vicious.
And the background, it's a clothesline.
Vicious.
The background was, and this is where that new HBO dramatic series featuring the Showtime Lakers, the dramatic comedy. John C. Reilly is playing Dr. Jerry Buss. I've only seen the pilot episode. He's very good as Dr. Jerry Buss.
Jerry West is not very happy with
Jerry West is not happy. And if you watch the first episode, I'm just going to tease why. It portrays him as just off the chain, out of control, vulgar, whatever. And I can see why Jerry West is upset. But in any event, you go back to that time period, and a lot of people are now watching that show, that reality, based on the true story of the Lakers and the Showtime dynasty.
Loosely.
Larry Bird was completely questioning the Celtics' toughness and whether they were tough enough. And Bird called out his own team through the media. We're not tough enough. The Lakers are too tough. That McHale Rambis play happened in like the first minute or two of the game when you go back to the 84 play. It was not like it took very long for him to send a message. And the Lakers got distracted by that, and the whole toughness thing of the Celtics came through. It was just a different time in the 80s. And I think it's fascinating that now a lot of the younger fans are going to get to know more about it because of that HBO series. I thought I'd share that.
And they did, and ESPN did a few years back a great 3 or 4 episode thing on the Lakers and the Celtics.
The 30 for 30 that went like 4 nights, right? 3 or 4 episodes.
And it chronicled all those things.
Bird. The NBA is what it is today because of that rivalry, those players, and all of those championships they won in the 80s. Made it into a multi-billion-dollar operation. Go back and watch it if you're a younger fan. It's worth it, and you're right. 1984, Google it, kids. YouTube it. McHale clothesline of Kurt Rambis.
Vicious.
Two-shot foul. Not even a technical foul.
That's it. No ejection. Nothing. All right, let's get to the wheelhouse of the NFL draft. Buccaneers picked. We won't go over every draft pick. We'll pick a couple guys and just highlight a couple things. You were in Raymond James Stadium hosting the draft party. It's part of the celebration that didn't end up being. Give the fans a little sense of draft trade, and the Bucs end up trading out of the first round. Good crowd at Raymond James. Just give a little atmosphere of the event.
So in my work duties, one of the many that you were roll calling earlier, I'm part of Buccaneers Radio and the draft host, and have been for about a decade now on Buccaneers Radio in the Tampa Bay area and the Buccaneers mobile app. So we were there doing the live draft radio show, and we had the PA speakers going in the club area of Raymond James Stadium. And there were several thousand fans in the club area where we were. Several thousand more season pass members were out in the lower bowl of the stadium as well to watch all of this. And again, the Buccaneers were slated to pick around 27, which would have been around 11:15-ish Eastern time, 3 hours into the draft when you're taking 10 minutes a team generally. So we're cooking along. We're talking about the other teams and what they're doing. You and I are going to go over that briefly here in a few minutes. We're getting to the Buccaneers pick finally after 3+ hours of talking about it, and they trade the pick. That's a first for me, Brother Powers, where I've sat there for the whole draft and they don't pick a player. So we have no player to talk about, much less a player to interview. We can't get Jason Light on with us on our coverage to interview him about the player because there is no player, because they made a trade. And traded out of the first round and got the first pick of the second round and some extra picks, which we'll get into in a moment. So I have worked all kinds because I worked the 2015 draft where they picked Jameis Winston right away in the first part of the draft coverage. So we literally talked to him like by 8:15, 8:20 p.m., 20 minutes into the draft coverage, we had talked to Jameis Winston. Within 30 minutes, we had interviewed Jason Light about picking Jameis Winston. Right. So we were basically just good. And then, okay, we're just kind of cruising along for the rest of the night. This one, we had to wait and wait and wait. And then it's like somebody stole Christmas. There's no presents to open under the tree. There's nothing there, but that's okay. We made it through, and the Bucs eventually made some picks.
Yep. Trade out of the first round. One, I think it's a salary cap deal. You save a bunch of money by trading out of the first round. Two, let's get to Logan Hall, the first pick, defensive end, Houston. You know, one of the needs for the Buccaneers is defensive line, a little bit of defensive line help. So he was kind of a guy. There was a lot of talk about him. There was a lot of talk about a couple of other guys potentially. Just, they pick Logan Hall. They pick a running back. They pick a tight end in like the third, I think, Cade Otton. They pick a tight end out of Washington. They even pick a punter. My neck of the woods in the fourth round.
We will get into that coming up because he's an SEC punter.
Yep.
It was interesting in that time frame where the defensive linemen on Thursday night started going.
Yep.
As the first round got into the 20s and into the mid-20s, there were defensive linemen going. And I guess, believe what you will here, but the Buccaneers basically said we had about 3 guys ranked the same way on our board.
Yep.
And so there was not one to us that was greater than the other one or worse than the other ones. We had them all on about the same level. So we decided to make the trade and pick up extra picks. And they end up getting Hall, the defensive tackle primarily, sometimes defensive end. Big at 6'6", can put some more weight on that body. Yep. And there's no guarantee for the Buccaneers that you're going to bring back Ndamukong Suh here. Right. And what's the long-term solution at defensive tackle? You got to get younger. And that's what they have elected to do. And then they pick up an offensive guard out of Central Michigan. And I love Jason Light going kind of with the lesser-known, smaller school guys. He got Ali Marpet that way to play offensive line out of a Division III school. Alex Kappa out of a Division II school. So you go get a guy out of Central Michigan in the MAC, big body to play guard or tackle for this team. More than likely going to play guard. So very interesting. And then you get a running back. You mentioned you get some tight ends, and we'll talk about the punter in a moment. But they addressed some needs with depth.
Yep.
And that will hopefully help them. The idea would be if you can get 2 or 3 contributors, much less 3 or 4 contributors out of this draft. And by contributors, I mean a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, a couple of these guys are still hanging around contributing. That's what you were looking to do in this draft. And I trust Jason Light. I trust Todd Bowles, Bruce Arians advising them. I think they probably did well to get themselves 2 or 3, if not 3 or 4 guys that can help a few years from now. We'll see.
Let's get to Jake Camargo, a guy you've seen in person, 4th round punter out of Georgia. And nobody wants to admit this, but Bradley Penny did not have a great year last year, kicking off and punting. He makes a lot of money. So again, from a salary cap situation, you're probably going to, if Camargo makes the team, you're going to probably save $2 or $3 million on the salary cap. So that's, again, for probably the same kind of guy. So Your thoughts on on Jake Camargo getting
so
drafted?
He's got a big leg on kickoffs too. So you do want to get younger. You do want to get cheaper. The only thing I will hearken back to, it's the second ever time the Bucks have taken a punter in the draft. You may or may not know this. I'm sure that our buddy Paul Stewart from buckpower.com, because he had the stats before, and I remembered this, but on the draft preview, he had this all the way, dead to rights, before the Bucks ever picked Camargo, the punter, this go around. So Paul's going to be cheering this if he hears this. The Buccaneers have taken a punter one other time in their history, and it was Ray Perkins. Perkins took the punter. Took the punter. Well, no, Perkins took a punter named Monty Robbins out of the University of Michigan.
Okay.
Took a punter named Monty Robbins in the 4th round, Jason Powers, just like Jake Camargo. And here's the footnote. Monty Robbins did not make the opening day roster. He kicked in the preseason and was a poor punter in the preseason. And Ray Perkins cut his 4th round pick before he kicked in a regular season game. And that's 1987. So that's 35 years ago. I don't know what's going to happen with this situation. All I'm saying is just know your Buccaneer history. And just because you drafted a guy in the 4th round, we saw it before many decades ago that it didn't pan out. And Camargo's got to come in here and win the job from Pinion, first of all, I would think. And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and obviously, Light, one of his biggest gaffes, not gaffes, but people remember him as he drafted Aguayo in the 2nd round. That didn't work out.
I'll go along with you. He's got to own it, and he does own it forever. It was a gaffe to trade up and take that guy, and he doesn't even make his 2nd season as your kicker, and he's all the way out of the NFL in just 2 seasons. It is a gaffe. It is a busted pick to have traded up into the 2nd round to go get that guy. So yes, these are sometimes risks. It's unusual to see a kicker or a punter be drafted very highly. The 4th round, not as bad as the 2nd round, obviously.
Sure.
So we'll see if it works.
Absolutely. All right. Let me get a couple just draft topics in general. What do you think of the TV coverage of the draft these days on 3 different networks? You got NFL Network, ABC, ESPN. Kind of ABC does a college theme. ESPN's more the traditional breakdown. NFL Network does their thing. What do you think of it being on 3 different networks as a viewer?
It's incredible.
And a fan.
It's overkill, and obviously you can't watch all of it at once. And so on Thursday night, we were locked in on the NFL Network. I couldn't hear what Rich Eisen and Joel Klatt and my buddy Charles Davis were saying on the NFL Network, Daniel Jeremiah, the scout. I saw them all night, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Of course, the ESPN coverage, Mel Kiper wasn't even there because of his vaccination status. How weird was it that Mel Kiper was at his house on video hookup? Yeah. I mean, Mel is synonymous with the NFL draft and ESPN's coverage. He wasn't there. And
Mel, one of the best 2 or 3 best draft moments in history involves the Buccaneers with Trent Dilfer.
Right. Where the Colts don't pick Trent Dilfer, 1994. And Mel went off, and then subsequently the Bucks did take him after the Colts did not take him. And so Bill Tobin was the famous executive with the line holding up the glass of water. Who the hell is Mel Kiper? He has the same qualifications as my next door neighbor, and he's a postman. That was his line. The only thing I have to say is Mel has devoted his entire adult life to covering the NFL draft and has carved out quite a niche. And Mel Kiper has now done the NFL draft for 25 years plus, since Bill Tobin has been part of a front office making draft picks. Yes. So who got the last laugh from the great soundbite of who the hell is Mel Kiper? Because there's nobody who knows who Bill Tobin is anymore about doing these picks. But still, Mel was there, and the coverage is over the top. I mean, but it's amazing, Jason. This thing gets 10, 12 million people to watch. And games, playoff games in the NBA, playoff Stanley Cup hockey games aren't getting anywhere near that in the same time frame. It's incredible how much interest, how much thirst there is for the draft.
And they even get ratings in the 5th and 6th round when we're picking guys. Again, you and I might have heard of a little bit from, but the average Joe fan has never heard of the guy from Central Michigan or from the guy from Toledo that gets drafted in the 5th round. So, and they still get ratings.
Yes, because there's just interest from all 32 fan bases of who are we getting to help us, and I want to know more. And there's an absolute appetite for this, and ESPN was such a visionary to put it on TV back in the early 80s, and people probably thought, I still remember watching the early days of it when they weren't even on the floor of the ballroom in New York, the smoke-filled ballroom at the hotel in New York. They were up like in the balcony sitting at a table.
Bob Lee, Paul Zimmerman, Bob Lee.
There was no Mel Kiper in those days, the early 80s, the mid 80s. But they were sitting like up in the balcony, almost like those two guys on the Muppets in the balcony, the two old Muppet characters. But it has come such a long way. They used to have like one of those grease boards with the marker, with the erasable marker where they're writing in draft picks.
Yep.
Now it's become a multi-million-dollar production, and they now bid this out to cities where Las Vegas hosted this past week, and Las Vegas had over 100,000 visitors come in for the 3 days to be around this. It's become such an event, and television's a big part of this. So ESPN was so smart back 35, 37 years ago to start putting this on TV in the early 80s.
Yep. And now the NFL, who owns the NFL Network, is going to then say, hey, we're going to farm it out to the NFL Network to where they can have multiple TV coverage. All right. Let's get to the themes. A theme of the draft: wide receivers.
Yeah.
The thought. I know you covered a bunch of these wide receivers: Jameson Williams, the Ohio State guys, George Pickens at Georgia. You did a lot of those games. Just talk about the theme of AJ Brown was the big trade of wide receiver on draft night to the Eagles because the Titans didn't want to pay him and all that. Just your thoughts about the theme of wide receivers.
Well, and we saw Marquise Brown traded from the Ravens to the Cardinals, and now we know DeAndre Hopkins is suspended. But back to the college receivers, Olave and Garrett Wilson. I saw them during the regular season with Ohio State against Indiana, and actually I had seen them the year before in the Big Ten championship game. They look like NFL receivers their junior year.
Yep.
So that's something else. That Jameson Williams, I know he's coming off the knee injury. You and I are very high on him. What an explosive player. If he's even back at like 80% of what he can be a big-time impact player as well.
Tampa product Christian Watson goes in the second round.
How about that?
Green Bay.
The big North Dakota State receiver, right? That can catch passes. So there's a lot of depth at receiver in this draft. And how fascinating that the Georgia Bulldogs, what was the official number 15?
Yes.
15 players, which is a draft record in just 7 rounds, picked off that Georgia team. So those are the two real storylines. You don't have a quarterback picked until the 20th pick.
Yep.
Georgia had 15 guys taken and a bunch of impact receivers changing hands. Olave obviously is now with the New Orleans Saints. So we'll see him against the Bucs secondary a couple of times a year every year.
How about the Minnesota Vikings? 2 different times in this draft, they traded with in-division rivals, Detroit and Green Bay, in the first and top of the second round. And both those teams go pick wide receivers. Jameson Williams to Detroit, they traded from like 30th to 12th or 22 to 12, whatever it was.
Right.
32 to 12, excuse me. Then in the top of the second round, they trade with the Packers and allow the Packers to go get Christian Watson.
Yeah, what in the name of Bud Grant? What in the name of Dennis Green are you doing helping Green Bay or the Lions or much less the Bears within the division? I agree on that. And it kind of mystifies me when like the Bills were trading with the New England Patriots.
Right.
Kind of the same way. It's like, why are you helping them when for so many years they were the bully, the big brother in beating you up? Certainly Rodgers in Green Bay. Why are you giving them receiver help, giving him weapons, giving him that opportunity? But strange bedfellows when you go to make the trades. And obviously the Buccaneers have a pipeline to make trades as well with New England, which they have done in the past. And they also traded with Buffalo and Jacksonville this go around.
Yep.
You keep those relationships going, but that is strange. I would agree.
Yeah, weird. All right, NFL schedule's coming out next week, late next week. A couple of these games have started to leak out already, all the international games. Do you have your passport ready, and are you ready to eat some
kraut,
some
schnitzel? I have never been to
and
Germany, but apparently we're headed that way now to Munich for the game with the Seahawks in November. What a swerve. Everybody thought that was going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was a swerve that it's the Seattle Seahawks that'll be the Buccaneers' opponent. And that means that the Chiefs join that. I mean, my Lord, the home schedule, Jason Powers, that has the Packers, Chiefs, Rams, the defending Super Bowl champs, by the way, with Matt Stafford in the playoff rematch, that has Joe Burrow and the Bengals, that has Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Get your tickets now. good luck on the secondary market when some of these games become Monday Night Football, Thursday night football. Let me run one by you. I know we got to go in a minute. Will the Buccaneers be playing a home game on Christmas Day now that the NFL has announced they're going to play 3 games on Sunday, December 25th at 1, 4, and then at prime time, 8 Eastern time? Is one of those going to be a Buccaneers home game? And is it maybe against Rodgers and the Packers? Is it maybe against Mahomes and the Chiefs?
That's a great question.
Stay tuned for the schedule release. We'll find out.
Question. That's a great question. It would not shock me. I mean, that you're going to probably, I mean, I know there's a lot of great quarterbacks nowadays, but Christmas night, Rodgers and Brady, because
oh my gosh,
those are the two.
That'll have 35, 40. That'll have 35 or 40 million people on that Sunday night watching that game easily.
Absolutely, if that's the case. I'm with you. You're probably right. You got a great home schedule. Full schedule release is mid next week sometime,
right
in the week. So you will all know here real soon what games are what. And remember, a lot of these games can be flexed. So
correct.
just because it's Sunday at 4 doesn't mean it can't be flexed to a Sunday night or a Monday night. So keep that in mind as well.
Well, and again, with Brady back, you're going to play a lot of standalone games on Thursday night, like you're mentioning, or Sunday night or Monday night. And we're anxious to see where those games fall, especially those home games fall with all those different teams. It's going to be wild to buckle up and do this once again, my friend.
Real quick on the broadcasting front. What do you think of Fox naming Burkhardt and probably Greg Olsen as the number 1 team to replace Buck and Aikman?
Hey, that's a natural progression. And Kevin Burkhardt's a great guy. I know of him a little bit, and all of his colleagues at Fox. Charles Davis worked with him for many years. They speak glowingly about and the work ethic that he has, does baseball as well as the NFL. And so he's going to get promoted to replace Joe Buck again for the fans. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are now going to do Monday Night Football. They both depart Fox after 20 years together doing games on Fox. They'll now do Monday Night Football together. It's going to be weird the first few times. And who knows, it may be a Monday night game right off the bat with the Buccaneers. The Buck and Aikman do. We'll see. But you asked me about Burkhardt. What a story, Jason. I don't know if you know much about his story. This is the same way that I've encouraged you off the air. Kevin Burkhardt had done some radio, some local radio, and he had given up on being a broadcaster. Literally, he shares his own story. He had begun to sell used cars, among other things. And he got encouraged, stay with it, get back in it, get an opportunity. And he did. He continued with his broadcasting career, and he's moved up the ladder at Fox, and good on him that he gets the opportunity now. These are coveted jobs. He is going to get to call the Super Bowl for Fox, Kevin Burkhardt. I mean, really, for the last 20 plus years, it's been Jim Nantz, Joe Buck, and Al Michaels that have called the Super Bowl on CBS, Fox, and NBC. They're now going to rotate Mike Tirico in for Al Michaels on NBC. They're going to rotate Burkhardt in for Joe Buck. And by the same token, ABC will now have the game. So Joe Buck will come in under the ABC umbrella when the ABC Super Bowl happens in a few years. So they're varying it up a little bit, but good on Kevin Burkhardt that he's part of that.
All right, I want to give one more plug before we go. Great addition to your boxing podcast. Dan Raphael's joined your group. Give a quick update about Dan Raphael. If you don't, if you're a boxing fan, you know who Dan Raphael is. Boxing for many years.
Dan does a tremendous job, and he's now with me on the Big Fight Weekend website and podcast. So check us out under Big Fight Weekend where you get podcasts. We got at the time we're releasing this podcast, we got a Canelo Alvarez pay-per-view this weekend, a bunch of big fights. We have the Tyson Fury fight in April, a bunch of other big fights coming in May, June, and July. Big Fight Weekend, the website and the podcast, and Dan is a great insider, newsbreaker. Thrilled to have him partnered with me. Thank you for giving me the plug here on Powers on Sports. And you're a fight fan too, like I am. Dan is hardcore, and he is Rain Man. He is Dustin Hoffman from the Rain Man movie with Tom Cruise on. He can tell you every fight for the last 40 years, where he was, where the fight was. It's incredible, his recall and his insight. So I love having Dan with me on Big Fight Weekend. Thank you for the plug.
You got it. All right. We are recording this on May the 4th. May the Force be with you. Who's your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, come on. It's got to be Han Solo. I mean, Luke Skywalker gets a lot of the attention, but I love Han Solo. Never tell me the odds, and all the great one-liners that Harrison Ford had with that and Indiana Jones. That's just it's tremendous to go back and watch those movies, but now I'm getting old. Those were 40 years ago, 43 or 44 years ago for Star Wars, 40 years ago for The Empire Strikes Back. But yes, excellent on May the 4th, or may the force be with you, my friend.
Yes, I talked to Drew Felios, our mutual friend, on the back end of this podcast, and he's a Lando Calrissian guy.
He loves him. Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader. So many ways you can go now.
All right, tell everybody where they can find you.
I love it. Buck Sideline Guy on Twitter, BUC, Buck Sideline Guy. Buck season will be here soon enough. You mentioned Big Fight Weekend for the boxing, Three Dog Thursday podcast for the underdogs and college football in the NFL. With that, we're good. Always good to hang with you, brother.
You got it. Lightning 1-1 with Toronto, game 3 and 4 this weekend in Tampa. Check out all the basketball, NHL stuff over the weekend, baseball going on. And we will be back with Drew Felios right after this timeout.